Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On these episodes I talk about what for me are the greatest rock and metal bands of all time, based on listening to thousands of albums and going to hundreds of gigs over many years. If you like what you see here, please press the red button to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. Today, as I'm sure you can see, the featured band is going to be the mighty Van Halen. Of course, both happy and sad anniversaries to celebrate this year. The saddest is that this will be always be the anniversary year of the passing of the legendary Edward Van Halen, the lead guitarist, background vocalist, songwriter extraordinaire in this brilliant Van Halen band. A band he co-founded with his brother, the drummer, Alex Van Halen. The other anniversary is the celebration of 40 years of this album, Women and Children First, and we'll come on to that in a little while. But first, a little bit of history about Van Halen. They burst onto the scene with this debut album, the incredible and by far not by far their best, because all of their albums are amazing, but, well, most of their albums are amazing. Let's rephrase that. The mighty Van Halen debut album, simply titled Van Halen. Untouchable. Absolutely brilliant album. If you ask any Van Halen fan what their favourite album is, most are going to say the debut album. So they burst onto the scene in 1978 with that as their first album, and then we got a series of albums year after year, a series of brilliant albums. But what was it about this band that made them stand out from the rest of the other bands in the LA scene from where they sprung? Well, it was all of the members themselves. There was the amazing guitar playing of Edward Van Halen, who was doing things on the guitar that people had never heard before. There was the brilliant showmanship and unique vocals of their lead singer, David Lee Roth. There was the powerhouse drumming of Alex Van Halen. And one of the things we talk about with guitar players a lot is that guitar players have their own sound. Vocalists, of course, naturally have their own sound, but guitarists, some of the best guitarists in the world, have created their own sound, their own tone. Alex Van Halen on the drums has a very distinctive drum sound. The minute you hear it, you just know it's Alex Van Halen's drums. And the band was rounded off with bass player Michael Anthony, and not only did he bring brilliant bass playing to the party, and with Van Halen it was a party, he also brought some extraordinary background vocals which are just as integral to the Van Halen sound as any of the other various sounds created by the band. And that is one of the things that made them so popular, that they were able to create a very unique sound between the four of them, but also they were as entertaining as anything, playing with big smiles on their faces. The lead vocalist, Dave Lee Roth, was a wildfire on stage, had some brilliant raps that he would say between the songs to put a smile on your face, and they just blew America away. Now I say America because actually it took quite a while for the rest of the world to really catch on. South America, yeah, they were big in South America, Japan, but Europe was very slow to catch on to Van Halen under the early 80s Van Halen I'm talking about here. And That wasn't helped by the fact that they didn't tour very much in Europe either, and they did a tour supporting Black Sabbath to support their first album, and then that was it until they came and played some festival dates to support the 1984 album, and we'll come on to that a little bit later too. So my introduction to Van Halen was this: 1980s, the 40th anniversary year of the album Women and Children First. And the original album of this, which I used to have, this is the reissue album. The original album came with a giant poster of David Lee Roth inside. The reprint, they didn't do that. The reissue, they didn't do that. This is a stunning album. For me, a very, very close second to the debut album. This is what I call their true heavy metal album. They really rock hard on this album. And to quote another band, the Wild Hearts, this is riff after riff after motherfucking riff on this album. My 4 favourite tracks, well, I would choose And the Cradle Will Rock, and the Cradle Will Rock. Brilliant chorus on this one, and I'm not going to keep repeating how great the riffs are. Well, I probably will actually. And then Everybody Wants Some. That's also one of my favourites on this album, and one of the tracks from this album that is was mostly played at their gigs throughout their history. A very popular song, especially on American radio as well. Then we come on to 2 songs, the other 2 songs are my favourite, that don't get talked about so much. Maybe because they are some of the heaviest songs. My next favourite track would be Romeo Delight. And again, an amazing, inventive riff on this song, and brilliant lyrics from Dave Lee Roth on this song as well. And then finally, my 4th recommendation from this album would be Loss of Control. Crazy song, really fast driving song, crazy vocals, just love it. And in fact, to be honest, it's really tough to pick just 4 songs from this album, because there is not a bad song on it. It is all killer stuff. A brilliant album, highly recommended. So that was my introduction to Van Halen, and it came because a friend of mine, who was the guy who kind of got me into rock and metal, that was one of the first albums that I borrowed off him. So that's my favorite album. Let's talk about the time when I was lucky enough to see live the legendary Van Halen with David Lee Roth as their vocalist. But before we do that, let's take a look at Rock T-shirts by the Sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So, I was lucky enough to attend the festival concert that I mentioned earlier, the only festival gig that Van Halen, with the first David Lee Roth era of the band, played. And this is the ticket from the concert. AC/DC, as you can see, were the headliner, and Van Halen was second on the bill. It was at the legendary Donington Park in the UK, here is the tour book from that show, and if we look inside, I have some press clippings from the show, and there you will see from Kerrang! Magazine is their review and some pictures of Van Halen on that day. And what did they think about Van Halen on that day? Let me have a little look. Have a look. Well, they actually thought very much what I thought. So let me tell you. Oh, before we do that, let's have a look inside the tour book at the Van Halen section. Okay, we have quite a few pictures here of Van Halen. We have an advertisement for their albums. Then we have the classic cover from Women and Children First album. And a few more pictures inside and a bit of a write-up. The show. This is the set list from the show. First off, the excitement to see Van Halen amongst the crowd was tremendous. I can still remember today that surge forward of this massive Donington crowd when Van Halen were just about to take the stage. There was real excitement to see this band in the UK, because like I said before, they'd only done one tour before, and that was supporting Black Sabbath. So UK fans had been starved of Van Halen, and for many it was the main reason why they attended the festival that year. What was the set list? Well, the set list, to be honest, even though it kicked off with the classic song Unchained, I have to say the set list itself was a little bit disappointing. Why? Well, if you look back on it today, you'd look at the tracks and you'd think, well, what are you disappointed about? There's some incredible tracks in there. Hot for Teacher, Running with the Devil, Everybody Wants Some, You Really Got Me. The problem was there were, for me at the time, too many tracks from the recent 1984 album. But of course there was, because that was the album they were promoting. It was 1984. The album had just been released, and I think the only disappointment is that obviously we'd been starved of Van Halen, and it would have been great to have got more tracks from across their history. But we did get pretty much a track from every album. But one of the other disappointing factors was, again, we didn't know this in the UK because we'd not been exposed to it, but actually when Van Halen played their headline shows in America, they used to do a lot of solos. So there'd be a long drum solo, there'd be a long bass guitar solo, there'd be a long guitar solo. And when we say long solos, we're talking maybe 10 minutes dedicated to the solo spots. In Eddie Van Halen's case, sometimes it might even stretch to 15 minutes, which even for the musical virtuosos that they are, it's still a little bit much. And in fact, Alex's drum solo came in after only 2 songs, which is very early in a set to have a drum solo. So it kind of killed the momentum a little bit. Now maybe it's not so bad if you've got a longer headlining show in America, but even though there was special guests, obviously they don't get the full amount of time, and so it was a bit much to have all those solos in the show. But when they were playing the songs, it was fantastic. Yes, some people would comment at the time about Dave's vocals not being as good as they are on the record, but so what? That actually applies to a lot of singers where they haven't got the enhancements that they can get in a studio. Dave Lee Roth wasn't and will never be the greatest singer on the planet, but what he is a fantastic showman, and we saw that on display that day. So overall, my first experience of seeing Van Halen live was brilliant when they were playing, but as an overall package, just that little bit disappointed that we didn't get more songs from them which they could have put in place of the solos. So there you have it. That's my experience of one of the greatest rock bands of all time, Van Halen. If you haven't investigated their catalogue, and especially the early catalogue with Dave Lee Roth, those first 6 albums for me really are the cream of the crop. Now, there is another era of Van Halen which featured a new vocalist, because Dave Lee Roth left to go solo after the 1984 album, and many will argue that actually was a more successful period for the band. I will talk about Van Halen with Sammy Hagar another time. My final thing I'd like to say is a tribute really to the great Eddie Van Halen. Thank him so much for creating such wonderful music, for bringing some brilliant guitar sounds that will be forever with me. He was a legendary performer on stage as well, constantly smiling, looking like he was enjoying himself, and that really transmitted to the crowd. Eddie Van Halen, a great loss to the world of rock music. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please press the red button to subscribe, and I will hope then to see you on future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. I always leave you with 4 albums I'd recommend from Van Halen. Well, they are the 4 that you see around me here. The debut album, Van Halen, the 1980 album I've just talked about, Women and Children First. Back here, a very underrated album, and I think it was never done any favours by its album cover. Not the greatest album cover in the world, but listen to the music. It was quite a different style for Van Halen overall, if you listen to the overall package of this album. And this is called Fair Warning, and the one that many people most know Van Halen for is this album, 1984, because this album not only has an amazing front cover, but also includes the tracks Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher, those 3 famous singles that really took them from being an American band to a worldwide band. So there you have it, Van Halen. Thank you for watching, and remember, as always, we rock!